For the Muslims in the audience, that the onus is upon us to sort of appreciate that tradition that we've come from and to use that as motivation into no matter what secular field we go into, to understand that the religious drive towards those secular fields should be what drives us. And for the non-Muslims in the audience, that I invite you to study this book on your own and to do some research and to find out about yourself, because, like I said, that how else do these scientific facts, do these scientific phenomena appear in a book which was revealed more than 1,400 years ago to a man who was literally in the middle of the desert? And so I think that as people who are in colleges, including myself, that this is a time when we have to learn about ourselves, to learn about the world around us. And so I challenge all of us and invite all of us to learn about other religions, especially about Islam, not so that we convert necessarily, but just so that we're more educated and we're more well aware of these phenomena and of these ideologies that dominate the world, so that hopefully that we can be voices of reason in a world now that has gone completely mad. So with that, I'll conclude. If I've said anything of benefit or of use, it has come strictly from Allah, and I've been nothing more than obedient for that. And if I've said anything wrong or misleading, it's come strictly for myself, and I ask for all of you to forgive me and for God to forgive me. Thank you for having me, and I hope you found this lecture informative. I'll now take some questions and answers or comments from the audience, if you would like. There's no such thing as a dumb question. There are some things as dumb people, but since we're at a university, I'll assume that they're not here. Yes? Yeah, how do you respond to Darwinism? You're talking about Darwin, like social Darwinism, or the actual theory of evolution? So that's something which is really interesting, because evolution still at the end of the day is a theory. It's macroevolution. So obviously microevolution goes on all the time. Bacteria, viruses mutate. That's why we have to get flu shots every single year, because they never know what the virus will be. And of course this year they screwed up on it. So if you got a flu shot like me, then you're out of luck. But so microevolution, there's nothing incompatible with microevolution, because we see the signs and the proofs in it, the whole time. But macroevolution, the problem with the theory of macroevolution is that it postulates that you have mutations which are beneficial, right? And now we know, like, if you look at any genetic disease, there's really no such thing as like a mutation like X-Men, which is actually positive. Like if you have a mutation, like if you have a cystic fibrosis, a gene mutation on the CFTR gene, on chromosome 14, you get cystic fibrosis. Okay? And there's like all these other diseases where you get mutations which actually cause people to die out, not to live longer. Right? Of course, there's certain mutations which do confer some sort of hereditary and evolutionary advantage, like they theorize that sickle cell disease, which is found predominantly in African Americans and Mediterraneans, actually gives you resistance to malaria, and so that favors the gene pool for those people to survive. So those things aren't incompatible with Islam. But what's incompatible with I think with Islam in particular, and even the Judeo-Christian tradition, is this idea that we came from like monkeys, essentially. That all life started in the sea, and you have like these intermediate life forms. But yet, if you look at the fossil record, like there's no proofs of that. And so we're unable to explain something like something as complicated. And I'll talk about it because I'm going into ophthalmology, like the eye. Like the eye, there's no proof that there's some intermediate thing which allows the eye to develop. That there's no intermediate a fossil of like a primordial eye or kind of this intermediate eye. But the eye found in creatures is so complicated and so sophisticated that it doesn't have the quote-unquote necessary time to evolutionary evolve to cause that. And so at the end of the day, I would argue that macroevolution is still a theory. And certainly there may be proofs which hint at it, but to accept it as science, I think that's doing science an injustice. And there's plenty of interesting books written about this. One book that I would recommend is called Evolution Deceit by Harun Yahya. And what he does in this is he scientifically looks at every facet of evolution and actually tears it apart from a scientific level. And just even like, what were those guys from the University of Chicago that theorized that if you have like water and like you shoot electricity into it, it forms like proteins. Was that the Urey hypothesis or something like that? But so if you have like to form a simpler protein, the most simplest protein that would be found in the human body, or an average protein that's found in the human body, is a 500 amino acids. To think that 500 amino acids lined up in the perfect exact order, and they all had to be. I wish I messed this up. Because sugars and amino acids. Who's taking organic chemistry and help me out? That sugars have to be in like a D formation, right? But amino acids have to be L. Is that right? Okay, see, I still remember that. But so the odds of all of that happening is like 1 over 2 to the 500 or something. He does this big mathematical proof in that, showing where these numbers come from. And so anything mathematically which is 1 over 10 to 50 zeros is considered mathematically impossible. And so that is like 1 over, it's a decimal point with 500 zeros and then a 1. So that's the probability that you have an average amino acid forming in the precise configuration that it should have formed. So again, I'm kind of forgetting a lot of the details, but what I would recommend is that it really highlights that in the book. And so ultimately, what Muslims would say is that there are aspects of evolution that we do agree with and are compatible with Islamic belief. But the idea that when Allah said that وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that we created human beings in the most excellent and the most perfect of statures and positions. So we understand that when we were created, that our forefather and grandmother, Adam and Eve, that they were created perfectly. And that they were created not from anything else, but they were created and the divine spirit of God was breathed into them. And that's what makes us human beings. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that we gave honor and nobility and dignity to the children of Adam. That we believe then that any theory that would say that we came from a lower life form as human beings would be incompatible to what Muslims believe. And so evolution may explain the how on a certain level, but it doesn't explain the why. And so therefore, that's where we would say that there's incompatibility. And certainly there may be other opinions on that.